Brett, you've had some heavy hitters on this podcast, and your guest right now is no exception. Dr. Eric Luster was a nuclear biology chemical specialist in the Army, went on to positions as a research scientist and senior systems engineer in both the private sector and DoD. But more to the point here, Dr. Luster's work led to the creation of a device to detect and report on traumatic brain injury in youth sports. He is also active in creating safe living spaces for seniors, has been recognized as the Veteran Entrepreneur of the Year, and is a recipient of the Bronze Star. Brett, he's all yours.
Yeah, I'm humbled and honored to have you here, Dr. Lester. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm doing great, and happy to see you, Brett, and Patrice. Really excited.
Yeah, so you and I connected. Well, I just like to throw this out for the full disclosure, and I'm, as you know, I'm directed to the point. Are you a client of mine?
No, I'm not.
Okay, and we met on LinkedIn about a month and a half, 2 months ago.
Yes.
And we had a 15-minute conversation. How did you feel after that short first 15-minute conversation? You and I had never spoke before, never met before. How did you feel after that 15-minute conversation?
Just like I would say the Marine way, I felt motivated after the conversation.
It's great, man. I just love this. And as this podcast grows and continues to mature, for me, it's been therapeutic to meet amazing veterans like you, which are doing so much and are giving back. And I'm learning so much. I know we're just kicking off this podcast, this episode, but I just want to say thank you in advance for everything you've done and that you're continuing to do. And first things first, you're my first African-American guest too, which is awesome. So that's it. Let's talk more about that. You mentioned something. There's an organization that I don't know anything about. So why don't you take a step, just talk about that organization first, which you mentioned. You said you have a story, and then I'll ask you about your time in the Army, if that's okay. How does that sound?
Yes, and just as a veteran entrepreneur, there are a couple of organizations that are very beneficial. One being IVMF.
IVMF?
Yes, and IVMF supports veteran entrepreneurs, and so they have an annual conference in Dallas, and that conference is called Veterans Edge. And from my understanding, it's one of the largest veteran business conferences in the country. And so a story, I was at the Veterans Edge about right before COVID, and it's well put together. It's at the Hyatt in Dallas.
Okay.
And I was sitting there, we were waiting on the keynote speaker, and I was wondering, everything else is together. Why is the keynote speaker late? And then in walks George W. Bush, and he waves off his security. He says, shut the door. I'm in the room with family. We're all veterans. And gave an awesome keynote. And so now I knew what the wait was. He was coming through his back door in Dallas. So
awesome. How many veterans were at that conference?
Anywhere between 400 to 500 veterans.
Wow.
In a given time. It's a 3-day conference.
Okay. So if you could, after this session, shoot me a link to that group and I'll blast it and make sure that all our listeners have access to it. And we include it when we launch the podcast, the episode too. I'd like to check it out because it's something we're trying to do. So when you're actually in the Army, what year to what year?
So I joined the Army in 1999 and I got out of the Army in 2005.
Okay. We had some overlap. I was 99 through 02. And then where was your last duty station?
My first duty station was Fort We Got You. It's Fort Huachuca, Arizona. That's what they call. So that's the main installation for the military intelligence school for the Army. But they did have contingents of tactical satellite. Actually, a Levitt Signal Brigade was there. So
okay. And then after 4 or 5 years, when did you make up your mind? Say, the Army's great, but it's really not for me.
Well, I will have to go back quite a bit. So,
please.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up in a rough area, and I always wanted to do something bigger and better. And so I graduated high school, and I went off to Prairie View A&M in Texas, which is unheard of in the small town I grew up in. But I lasted 1 semester. So I got back home, and when I went home to Alton, Illinois, I felt like the walls were closing in on me. And so I was always good in one particular class that caught my attention, that was honors chemistry. And the local recruiter, he knew it. So he heard I was back in town and he called me out to lunch. And I said, oh, okay. Well, at the time I had 20/20 vision, so I was actually going to the Air Force. I had the ASVAB scores, and the Air Force was out to lunch. And so being eager like I am, I was shown a video on a nuclear biological chemical specialist. And so I knew nothing about the Army, and I said, hey, this is it. I'll sign up for that job.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. So you just jogged my memory. This is a weird trait or kind of party favor I used to use in bars when I was younger. So you remember, so you're good with chemistry, you're good with the periodic table of elements?
I used to be. I used to have it memorized.
Right? I'm going to throw a couple at you. Let's see what you got. Something fun. BK.
BK, next question.
Berkelium. GE.
Berkelium.
GE.
He is
Now, wait a minute. That's Burger King and that's General Electric. So
no, germanium. Germanium.
Germanium. Okay.
Right. I used to have the whole thing memorized too. I have the 27 helping verbs memorized, but I won't throw those at you right now. It's kind of a fun bar trick. So bring out like 5. You just have to remember 5, and you could throw it out and just like amaze people at bars. So that's a good thing. So just
wow, yeah, and I'm upset with myself because I've been quizzing the kids on this. So
there we go. No, it's kind of fun. I don't know why there's a couple of those just stuck. I had the flashcards. I made them all. I think I had to memorize them my sophomore year of high school, and just a couple of them stuck. It's just really weird, but that's cool. So I digress. So you're at the same duty station the whole time, and after 5 years, why not stay in?
Well, so remember, I was really driven. I lasted 1 semester at a top engineering school at Prairie View and A&M, and was really excited. I was excelling with no money and no books, and so I joined the Army. I wanted to get back to college, so I did the delayed entry program, signed up for 2 years active, 2 years reserve. But when I got to the unit, I signed up for 2 classes at the community college, and we had to go to the field, and I failed both classes. So at that point in time, I was discouraged. I was going to just say, hey, college isn't for me. But I wandered into my commander's office. I always worked late, and I figured, I said, wait, I know someone who has a degree, so how about I ask him how to study? And he heard my story, and he said, hey, no problem. Every time we go to the field, we're going to get you back to class. And so that was a trend. And so I enlisted 2 times after that, and was able to complete an entire bachelor's degree within 4 years. So
While you're active duty full time?
Yes.
Awesome. That's great. So the Army was part of your more education program. You were investing in yourself, and you spent time in the Army, and that financially rewarded you and enabled you and empowered you to get your college degree at the same time. And that was your main focus?
Kind of. So
Okay.
I have a different philosophy to life. So
Sure.
A lot of the goals that I set, they build on each other, but they're always geared towards someone else and helping someone else. So when I arrived to the unit as a nuclear biological chemical specialist, I was fortunate. I was stationed in a tactical satellite battalion. And I came out of my NBC cage, and I asked one of the soldiers, an E4, I asked him, hey, how do you work this Cisco router? And he says, hey, the Army didn't train you on routers. Go back in your cage.
Oh.
And I said, oh, okay, great.
Oh.
So, in 2 years, I completed the best education in my entire career, and that was an associate's degree in network management.
Okay.
So in 2 years, I was an E5 now, and I was actually teaching that class on the Cisco router to the unit, because everyone else, they were trained by the Army, and it was more tactical equipment, but technology had moved so fast. We had to deploy the Cisco suite of tools and Microsoft tools.
Did you find that soldier that gave you shit and tell him to go back in his cage?
Yes, actually, he was the soldier that asked the most questions. And
ironic, huh?
A big paradigm shift is this gave me goosebumps because I didn't even realize I got promoted so fast. Here now I'm an E5, I'm a sergeant, and the soldier gets up, he's still an E4, and he says, hey, how does this work? But my new peers, the other sergeants in the room, reminded him, "Hey, you need to stand at parade rest when you're addressing Sergeant Luster."
There you
And
go.
it gave me goosebumps, and I was like, "Wow!" But needless to say, I did not take it as a revenge thing with that soldier, because I ended up taking over the platoon. I became the platoon sergeant with $20 million worth of equipment and 40 personnel. And now that soldier reported to me. So I'm glad I was able to keep a cool head.
That's great. That's a good story about humility, right? And being humble. So with that, you went from being Sergeant Lester to Dr. Luster.
Yes. So I would say out of everything, that's probably one of the scariest things.
Scariest?
Yes. Transitioning out of the Army and transitioning into the civilian world.
When did you make up your mind? What was going through your mind when you were in the Army? Like, I'm because you were promoted. You're obviously in the fast track. You're sergeant 2 years. You re-enlisted twice. Did you say I've got my education, my goals are met, and I was planning to get out? Or what was your thought process after having so much success in the Army? And you also had a Bronze Star, and then saying, okay, I'm getting out. Well, talk me through that.
Well, in addition to, I actually was inducted into the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club, which is top
Really?
1%. Yes.
That's awesome.
And so
That's
I
really
was
awesome.
on the fast track, but the U.S. Army Recruiting Command called. And they called and they insisted that I go to U.S. Army recruiting. So I went down to Fort Jackson in South Carolina with 6 months left in the Army. And the USAREC Sergeant Major came to me personally and said, "Hey, I read everything about you. I sent everyone home that had less than 12 months. I'm going to show you how good a recruiter I am. I'm going to keep you in the Army. And you're going to stay in this class." And I was really excited, but I had a bigger decision making. At the end of the day, they assigned me to Syracuse, New York. Mind you, we've been in Arizona, Southern Arizona for 4 years now, or
Right.
6. Yep. And so my wife just flat out said no. that was
happy wife, happy life.
Yep. She said no way. No. And so I had to take that into advisement, and I made a command decision. But Northrop Grumman Mission Systems called.
Okay.
And they wanted to incorporate their nuclear biological sensors onto the computer network. So I just made myself the perfect candidate for that role.
So they found you.
Yes, they found me.
That's a nice. So once they found you while you were still in,
yes,
that made things very easy then.
Yep.
And you're still married today.
Yeah, long time. So it's funny because my wife just posted a homecoming post. So back in high school, I was a homecoming king, and my wife went to the public school, and she went to the Catholic school. And she was my date for homecoming.
Okay.
And so we go all the way back to homecoming sweethearts.
That's great, man. That's
Yeah.
good. You don't. That's a great story. Just gonna say it's a great story because you hear so many times, so many veterans go through, they sacrifice and they give up for a spouse, or the spouse gives up for them and then it doesn't work out, or they go into deployment, they come back, they're pregnant with someone else. Like, you hear all these horror stories. It's great to hear a good story. It's great to hear a good story. Actually, I will say, of the guests that have been on the podcast thus far, almost all have had phenomenal marriages, which is leading me to come to a conclusion. A strong partner helps the synergy between a man and a woman, or it could be man and woman now. That's the new trend. Between a power couple, I think that having that partner that supports you through the bad elevates you even higher when things are good.
Yeah, and Brett, I had some experience with it. So I'm actually a twin. So I've always had someone to play with. And so I learned
like, you're ugly. Wait a second.
Well, that's the thing. So I actually developed a lot of my philosophies through growing up rough with my twin brother. And as we grew up, I figured out something that was very valuable to succeeding in a partnership. You see, my brother was always competitive. He was a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. He'll say he was a little cuter.
Of course.
But I would always win.
Okay.
And the reason why I won is because I competed for us. So while he was competing, he would compete for accolades for himself. I always competed for us. And when I figured that recipe out, you always knock down every barrier. No one can tell you no. If you're doing and you're putting a mission before yourself, they just got to get out the way.
So there's no I in team.
Yep, absolutely.
That's a great lesson. That's a phenomenal lesson. Well, then how did you, again, go from being Sergeant Lester to Dr. Lester?
Yeah, prior to Sergeant Lester and being the Marine way, I had to learn the hard way. I ended up getting a staff sergeant.
The Marine way. I like that. I like how the Army's giving us a tough time right now.
Well, I made a mistake and called a female Marine. She was a staff sergeant, and I called her sergeant. And and we were deployed. And it was like, oh, whoa. It was like the music stopped.
Yeah.
But needless to say, I was deployed. But and when I was deployed, I had met a friend before I deployed, a Marine gunnery sergeant.
Okay.
And he told me about being an NCO. And so we would work on school projects, but he would mentor me on being a sergeant. Not a sergeant in the Marine Corps, not a sergeant in the Army. It was, hey, this is how you lead individuals. This is how you make sure that they're going to follow your lead. And so I implemented that strategy. That's one thing. I've always been a sponge. I implemented that strategy along the way. So
What's one lesson he gave you that you can share right now?
One lesson was always showing that humility. So when I got promoted to E6, there was an E5. There was an E5 when I was an E2. We met. I was an E2. He was an E5. Well, his grandmother had passed away, and so I was so locked into who he was and who I was that I as a platoon sergeant, I forgot to send the family flowers. And then this sergeant, he was walking around the unit, and he was really disgruntled. He was really upset. It was not only it was only when I pulled him to the side to talk to him, and that's when it dawned on me that you can't rely on static situations. You always have to move. And so that was one thing that gunnery sergeant always told me. I call him OT. It's Othello Taylor, and he was a drill instructor too, so it was a whole different demeanor with it. But he would always instill in me in not being static and waking up. And leadership requires you to be on the move, and so
Awesome.
And you have to show that humility with it. And so that was something that I had to live with because I just totally forgot, because I was looking at now my subordinate as I had looked at him for years. And I just absolutely did not take the responsibility that I was dealt with.
Okay. That's a good lesson to learn then. And so how do you apply that today? Or actually, before, you still haven't answered my question. It's how you became Dr. Lester, excuse me.
So, of course, I knew everything about the nuclear, biological, chemical core. I was an expert. So Northrop Grumman, they put me in a cubicle and put me on a teleconference, and PhD researchers from George Mason got on the teleconference, and they told me how nuclear, biological, chemical, and downwind hazard actually works. And I walked away from that conversation, and I said, I don't know anything. First of all, I didn't know anything they were talking about. I was trained on the application, not all of the math and the science. So I was intrigued with the doctor's degree. And so I ended up, for a little while, I did government contracting. And I found myself at Arizona State when I caught the attention of the senior vice president, who's now the director of the National Science Foundation. So he pulled me into the lab for the Center of Cognitive and Ubiquitous Computing.
I can't say that 10 times fast.
And so needless to say, I had my own technology that I was developing, but he said, hey, I'm going to take you under my wings. and I'm going to place you around some resources. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I had learned a great deal out in industry and in corporate. And so that made me really passionate about person-centered design. So one thing
Person-centered design. I'm trying to process what you just shared. Person-centered design. What is that?
Yes, that's where in the military, when working with a large project that a lot of government contracts, there's so many different companies in the mix that they failed to incorporate input from the actual user. So as I was working on these projects, I was a warfighter. I had deployed, and when I'm looking at the final product, I have a notepad full of notes on why this is not going to work for the warfighter. But it's too late. We're 10 years into the project. So what do you do? And so I became very excited and very passionate about this person-centered design. And so I developed quite a bit of IP in my company, Movement Interactive, as we make sure that we develop the right technology for each person versus a one size fits all.
Okay. That makes sense. And is that leading into how you got your doctorate?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So,
I cut you off. Sorry. Forgive me. You were mid thought and
sorry.
I jump in sometimes because my brain's flowing too. So please, sorry if I derailed you there. Please jump back on.
No, you're keeping me on track here because I'll talk along here. So as I was studying at the Center for Cognitive and Ubiquitous Computing, I was about 4 years into the program, fully funded PhD in computer science. I traveled more than I did in the military because I started publishing papers all across the world. But I also developed my own technology. So I developed a sensor for detecting and reporting concussion. And so this small wearable device can detect up to 200 Gs of force and in real time alert personnel of the severity of each head impact.
That's huge.
And so while I'm sitting there in 4 years of computer science, my son was playing football. Well, tragedy struck in that 4-year period. I had a player, Charles Uvella, who came down from Northern Arizona, and he was playing a playoff football game, and his team was losing by a lot. He scores a touchdown and gets concussed during the celebration.
Oh no! During the
Yes.
celebration.
Yes. So this, you can't depend on eyewitness accounts. Everyone's not even paying attention. Charles Uvella continued to play and collapsed on the field, and so he did not make it to the hospital alive. And so I sat down with Dr. Punch, who's your director of national.
So hold on, let me stop you. So this young man came down, played a football game with your son. They were losing, scored a touchdown. Somehow in the celebration dance, he and his teammates probably bumped heads. Something happened, didn't realize it, continued to play, collapsed, and the young man died on the field.
Correct.
Wow. How old was he?
His family.
How old?
He was in high school, so he was 16 or 17 at the time.
Okay.
And so my son actually played on Saturdays, and Charles, that game was on a Friday night.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's the motivation. Was that a moment for you when you saw that happen?
Well, yes. So I sat down with the top scientists in the world right now, and we had to make some tough choices. Does the world benefit from Dr. Luster from a 4-year degree, or a PhD degree, or do we get this technology out of the research and into the hands of users? So you had mentioned something about failure. So one
Please.
thing, I failed to listen, and so I'm talking to Dr. Punch, and he says, "Hey, if you go down this pursuit, you're not going to be able to do both. A PhD program is so intense." And he knows me very well, so much to where he even sent me to some resources in regards to PTSD. He was that in tune with the students in his lab. And so his comment was that, hey, I know you're going to try to do, if you try to do both, it's going to take double the amount of time. If you try to build a company, complete a PhD program, it's going to take double amount of time. So I actually transitioned the PhD to try to do part-time, but you can't do a part-time PhD.
Right.
I found out. And it took double amount of time. And so that's something that sits with me. And that's one of those things where I just failed to listen.
So with that though, I'm assuming you. I shouldn't assume. I should ask you. So you chose the company then instead. You were failing with your PhD, and did you go and build a company, or how did that?
Yes,
You
I
had
went
the idea for a product. How did the idea for a product in your mind, or just walk me through that? So, because now I'm trying to understand your entrepreneurial path and your entrepreneurial journey. So you saw the young man die on the field from concussion. You didn't know at the time. You found out afterwards.
Mhm.
How did your mindset go from that moment to, or actually, where did the idea come up for the sensor to recognize trauma, or is it blunt force? Is that what they call it? Blunt force trauma. Where did that thought come from, and where did you get the ideas? Like, I want to make this product, or was I want to make a company first? Or because I have a lot of veterans will come to me with an idea for a product, and an idea for a product isn't necessarily a business, right? It's two totally different things. So what came first, the idea for the product or starting a business?
So remember I talked about that person-centered design.
Yes.
So one thing I did is, I have a book out. I had to get over myself, and that's the title of the book, and it describes that whole getting over yourself. So I had technology that I was proposing. I was actually going to put the sensor inside of a football helmet, but I interviewed over 500 players, coaches, parents, and for a while, the first 30 or 40 interviews, I wasn't even listening. You know why? Because I documented everything that they told me. And when I went back in my moment of clarity, I realized that I was not listening. And so that's when I had to get over myself and actually listen. And I had to go and build what they were asking for. Because I was going to put the sensor in a football helmet because I played football, and I was going to use it for military applications because I was in the military. But the parents were saying that they were concerned about soccer, baseball, cheerleading. So that's where the technology evolved. So we actually came up with a design to put the sensor inside of a headband that ergonomically places the sensor above the center of gravity, and allows us to measure acceleration and rotation, something that was very innovative. So we continue to just put the customer at the center of ideation. A lot of people develop an ideal and they just start running with it. And we do it the opposite way. We come up with something that we think will work, and then we go talk to as many people. And we actually just really start doing qualitative research at that point.
Thank you for clarifying. This is making me think of more questions. You keep saying we. So at this point, is it a product idea that you had, or did you have a company already? Who was
company, I say we because while I was at Arizona State in those 4 years, I found the sharpest computer scientist that I could find, except he was an electrical engineer. And so that was excellent. So I have a co-founder that I met along the journey. And so when I say we because I tried to do the computer science thing, but I have a team that's much smarter than when it comes to the nitty gritty, because we built this center in house. And
so did you have a company then though, or when did you create a company for this? Because right now, if you're in college, you have an idea. Sounds like you met a professor and you realize he's smarter than you. So we always know it's great to surround yourself with people. You want to be the dumbest person in the room. If you want to build a great company, if you're the dumbest person in the room and you surround yourself with smart people, you have a much better chance of elevating yourself and your outcome. So what came first, the chicken or the egg, the idea for the business, or the business first?
I would say the idea for the business, because we were operating without the company initially. Because when I had the idea, my approach was to go to the university and just grab a couple of professors and fine tune it. When I got to the university, they looked at me and said, "Hey, it doesn't work that way. Here's the research you're going to work on." And and you could just play with your ideas. But that all changed one day when I wrote a grant and I won a grant from National Science Foundation. That's when all of the researchers came and said, "Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Let's see what you have."
Well,
And so,
let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. So let's dig deeper there. So where did you get the thought? The university saying, do this work. You, in your mind, you have another idea of your own project, your own goal that you want to achieve. And where did you get the idea to do or apply for the grant? Because that sounds like it's a catalyst. That's a pivotal moment. So you could do what the university wants you to do, or you could shift and apply for this grant and get funding for your idea. That sounds like a pivotal moment. Do you agree?
yes, but it sounds like I'm described as a portfolio entrepreneur.
Okay.
So of course I'm going to do both. So if I'm sitting there and the research they gave me, you ever heard the term "stand on the shoulder of giants"? So Dr. Ponce worked on this research, and it was very similar. It was using sensors to monitor stroke survivors, and so throughout that program, I actually learned how to do a clinical trial, how to do an IRB user study. I learned how to conduct qualitative and quantitative research. And so now, armed with that education, I could now go and expedite what I had envisioned, because now I'm equipped with better tools to do so. And so this dates all the way back to high school. My freshman year, and it took me a long time to get here. So when I say portfolio entrepreneur, that's many of the startup communities, they don't understand that this is new concept that's coming out with entrepreneurship. So all the way back to high school, my freshman year, my twin brother and I, we made the varsity football team.
So freshman.
Yes, as freshman.
How big were you your freshman year? How big were you your freshman year?
Yep, really excited. But I heard the marching band was going to Disney World for the Citrus Bowl.
Okay.
So of course, I signed up for both. So I was the guy that did band camp, did 3-day practices for football, and first freshman ever at the high school to have to change into their band uniform at halftime.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What'd you play in the band? What'd you play in the band?
I
They give you a big drum.
in percussion, so I was in the pit. So I played the timpani, and I excelled. I got solos, and I actually got to play. We were little, but we got to play some some varsity football. So
you played. That's a weird digression, but it's a great story. So freshman playing on varsity, jumping out the band at halftime, changing back to play football again the second half. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that story only tells you that I'm going to do both.
Okay. I was like, wondering where you're going with this. Thank you.
So you said, hey, are you going to work on their technology, or are you going to work on your? I have to do both. In fact, while I was taking the 15 to 18 credit hours a semester in the Army, one semester I took off, and everything fell apart. Like I couldn't get anything done. And so it's been a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. So,
well, it's a lesson learned. What's a lesson? You got to pick and choose your battles. There's only so much bandwidth.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned you were voted, was it something best veteran entrepreneur? What was your award? Patrice read it. I don't want to butcher it.
Veteran Entrepreneur of the Year at Oklahoma State. That was.
How did that work? Tell me how that happened.
That was through IVMF and through that Veteran Edge organization. They had a contingency at Oklahoma State University, and so it was a week-long boot camp in January in the snow. Me coming from Arizona, but it was pretty cool. I grew up in the snow.
Okay.
But competed against some very talented veterans, but equipped with what I learned at Arizona State and what I've learned because my doctor's degree is actually in business. And so that's where I tie everything in together. So that goes to answer your question a couple of segments ago.
Yeah, sure. So is that now the business that you run or the product you developed? So I'm trying to understand, because there's the product aspect and there's the business aspect, right? So how do they come together as you're going through this journey and you're thinking about the sensor and you had the mentorship again for this? I guess you're one of the senior professors at the university who's working on stroke research, and they were going, I guess, for older individuals, and you were thinking for younger athletes. How did it kind of come together? And what was I'm still trying to understand, is you said you're doing both, I guess, the company and the project. Like how did that merge? And then what was your mindset kind of trying to balance it all? Because right now there's only so much time in the day. There's only one Dr. Luster. You only have a twin, but you're doing the work. He's doing his own life, right? So with that, how do you pick and choose and balance everything as an entrepreneur? Because as an entrepreneur, a lot of times that means you're everything and nothing, right? A lot of times you're broke and you're turning the lights on, but you got to pay for the lights. You walk in the door, you got to vacuum the carpet when you leave, you got to take the trash out. You're doing everything when you're first getting going. So how did you balance all of that? How did you figure out where to prioritize your time?
Gotcha. And that took a long time for me to figure out, but I've had a lot of practice at it. So just like I said, the football, the analogy with football and the marching band, it's really led to being this portfolio entrepreneur. So in portfolio entrepreneurship, you put the customer first. So it doesn't translate well when I talk to investors. So when I talk to investors and they say, hey, what's the bottom line? What's the margin? I'm more concerned about getting the technology out to the customers. And so what I've done is created verticals. And along this journey, within those verticals, I'm really good at building solid teams. So each vertical has a team to execute. So I come up with the idea, I come up with the roadmap to get us there, and I surround myself with people who can actually execute. And so at the core of everything that I do with portfolio entrepreneurship is this patented technology that we develop. And so I've created 3 verticals around it. And that's one, using the sensor for concussion detection, using the sensor for DOD vertical, and then also newly added fall detection with the same core technology.
So there are 3 different target markets, one vertical kind of focusing on one outcome.
Yes.
And then you said your team. So what's your corporate structure now?
That's pretty complex. So I have a small
I'm
team.
learning you are complex. So that's kind of par for the course with you.
Yep. So I have a small team within Movement Interactive, very talented, multi-use type of talent. So we have my CTO who develops a lot of the technology. We outsource some of the mobile app development, and we have about 3 personnel in marketing and sales. And so,
so let me ask this. How did you figure out you needed them? What was your thought process? Hey, I need some sales, need some marketing. When did you realize that was an area of weakness and you needed to build up that team?
I'm a little different with that. So I have this strong entrepreneur mindset, and I've worked in corporate. So I don't like when at this early on, when the mindset of transactional type of work sets in, because that mindset doesn't fit with me. When I say transactional, you get some new employees that have come from corporate, and they're used to showing up at the office at 9 o'clock, and they have this report to do. Well, in my life, we wake up, we come up with a plan, but we're always pivoting, we're always moving to fully execute and deliver on that plan. And so it's a different mindset, I should say.
Right. But you didn't answer my question. Sorry to be.
No, go ahead.
So when did you find the need? You have an idea of product that you had to hire marketing and salespeople. When did you have that decision? When was that decision?
Yeah, so that decision was when the actual need came. So one of our biggest partnerships with the concussion detection piece is the Women's Premier Soccer League. So with the customer, they're the largest semi-pro soccer club, women's soccer club. And so that's when I actually reached out to one of my colleagues. She's my director of soccer. She's actually the first female soccer player to play men's professional soccer. And so Lindsay Eversmeyer is a critical addition to the team. and has been really critical when we take on that particular customer as the Women's Premier Soccer League, because I'm often the keynote speaker at their annual meeting.
Okay.
And it's great to hear from scientists, but it's one thing I've learned is you want to hear from someone that relates to you. And so,
Okay. So you realize, hey, she could come on board. She could be the voice for our product.
yes.
Okay. And that was your first sales rep. And you said now you have a marketing team and 3 more. So how did you realize you wanted to add to that?
As we continue to expand, so we found out the hard way, digital marketing is not easy.
Oh, hold on. You said we found out the hard way. Does that sound like a failure lesson?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me about that. I hear one more failure lesson. I'm going to ask you for a nugget. So let's go through
Excellent.
a
Yeah.
failure lesson.
So we jump in. We have an excellent product. We got a marketing team to push it. After you get through all of the technology that's required to do a B2C play, a B2C play is something that requires a lot of time and is intensive on capital. And so as we started to build content and we started to grow into this getting in front of the eyeballs that we needed to, that's when we learned that's when we figured out that we need to raise more money in order to successfully go after the B2C play.
Business to consumer play. Okay.
Yes.
So where was the failure though? Where do you like, oh no, we spent money, threw good money after bad in marketing? Because marketing's not sales, right? Marketing is not sales.
Yeah. The failure is that we got to sales, but we ran out of money.
Oh.
So we created a budget of $30K and we got the market seasoned. It was ready to go. We started to see sales. They come through. I mean, the sales were coming in when we were sleep.
Huh.
But we stopped the ads. As soon as we stopped the ads, all of the sales stopped.
Really? So
Yes,
you got the old adage, you got to spend money to make money.
Yes, it was immediate.
Wow.
Yep. So
that's a huge lesson.
Failure. And I took a step back, and of course I get back on the trail to start raising more money. I've had this little taste of, oh yeah, we have some sales going, and I'm really excited. But then I had this lesson learned that, okay, if you don't raise enough money and you stop the ads, you're going to jeopardize the momentum you've just built.
I was just going to say momentum. So that's a great lesson about momentum. So if there's one lesson you have out there, the whole purpose of this podcast is to chat with hopefully other veteran entrepreneurs are listening and they have their own journey, their own idea, their own business. They're either developing or they're mid-cycle or even they're senior and they're looking to exit later on. What is the one lesson or nugget or the one piece of everything that you've had in your career, Dr. Luster, that sticks out the most? What's the one lesson you'd like to share with another veteran entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say putting others above yourself, and that includes the customer. So a lot of times we get really wrapped into ourselves. We're passionate. We come in with this strong bias, but what you're going to do is you're going to develop something that you love and someone else does not necessarily have the need for. So that's the problem that I see. And I'll leave you with a use case on this.
Please.
So remember that third vertical was for fall detection.
Yes.
Well, I own a senior living facility in Glendale. So we have 150 residents. This started off as community work, but I'm very, very passionate. I called a town hall with residents, and I found out just by listening, I mean, their number one problem was falls.
Mm-hmm.
So they were concerned about falling, and most importantly, they would not report a fall even if they had fallen. And the reason why is because they're independent living and they don't want to be recommended for dependent care.
Got it.
So that's what led to, and that's that whole portfolio entrepreneur. When I see a need, I go back to the team and I said, hey, how can we address this? That's the driver in my whole philosophy. The money and the margins, all of the business side of that will come if you develop the right product. And
if there's a need first, right?
Need.
You could have a great business, could be efficient with SOP, but if no one wants what you're offering, you've got no market, right? You've got to have demand for whatever product or service you're selling. Then you got to have cash flow. That's what I'm hearing you say. So
Yes.
find out what the market needs, listen, be present, understand what the market's telling you. You may have an idea. I think it's a huge, the biggest lesson I'm taking away from this is you may have an idea or thought in your mind what you think is right, but that may not be what the market says is what the market wants. And then having the humility to be able to shift, say, I like my idea, but the market doesn't want my idea. The market wants this. And then, okay, shift to what the market wants. You've got demand, and then build the business to fulfill that demand. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. And so that prompted me to actually write about it. And so that's the title is Get Over Yourself.
Is it a book or is it a white paper or what is it?
No, it's a book. It's a book that I published.
Can we buy it? Where can we buy it?
Yes.
Market yourself. Tell me where to buy it. Tell me how to contact you.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Oh.
And the book is Get Over Yourself. And subtitle is How to Move Without the Ball. So I start off life about this entire journey. I liken life to a basketball game where you're the point guard of your life. You have these other 4 players at any given time. These are the folks that you call. And you have 2 coaches on the sideline, a trainer. These are your mentors. These are your peers. But I break life down into quarters like a basketball game. So from 0 to 20, first quarter, 20 to 40, second quarter. And then you have this moment when you hit your 40s. And that's halftime. That's when we really start to assess. And then the question we have to ask ourselves is, are you up by 20 at halftime or are you down by 12? And so that's where it really gets interesting because you have to get over yourself and be honest. And so what I do is we actually look at data and have metrics to identify, because no one's going to say, and this came from my wife. I said, we wrap up the book and I asked her, are you up by 20 or down by 12? She said, oh yeah, I'm up by 10. And I said, wow. I said, well, let's look at the zip code we live in, because the goal is to get to overtime. Overtime is 80 plus. And that's where my experience with working with the seniors, I've incorporated that into the life lesson here.
That's great. That's great. Well, share again the name of the book, Doctor, and then how, if someone wants to reach out with questions, comments, do you have a website reach out to, or should they find you on LinkedIn, or what's the best way to reach you?
Yes. So I can, our company is movement-interactive.com is the website. And then Get Over Yourself can be found on Amazon.
And what do you ask for the book? How much is the book?
The book is $24.95.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, when the second we hit the stop record button, I will go on Amazon. I will buy it. So that's awesome, Doctor. Appreciate that. And quick question: do you shoot at all? Are you a gun guy at all?
I used to. I haven't been to the range in a while.
All right, I may have something for you. I'll just leave it there. So I think
excellent.
this is good. So this has been a great episode. Humbly, I appreciate you being on and sharing. I think you offer a lot of lessons, a lot of determination and grit, right? And you're kind of humble in your failures. Kind of like, we just had a reader. You don't admit it, but like you've learned, you failed, you've been pushed down, you step up, keep going and going and going, and you don't have quit in your vocabulary. It's grit, not quit. Wow. I'm not, Angela Duckworth has the whole book, True Grit, but you are all about just shifting and learning and being fluid and being able to adapt on the move, as that gunnery sergeant told you from the Marines. So this has been great. I appreciate you being on here. I think as you continue your journey, I'd love to have you on again.
Oh, excellent.
Right. Yes. And if there's anything you need from me ever, you can reach out. So just for yourself and also the listeners, I'm Brett at SWE90.com, our website. That's just SWE is short for Strategic Wealth Endeavor 90.com. So Brett at SWE90.com. And then if you need to call, any questions, comments, or if you have another veteran entrepreneur that you think should be on the show that has some good lessons that we could all benefit from, please reach out, Brett at SWE90.com, or just give me a call, 310-491-7045. Again, 310-491-7045. Patrice, back to you.
All I want to add is follow and subscribe to the podcast to know when the latest episode is ready. And of course, share with friends and family and colleagues. Thanks for being with us.